Welcome in to another episode of Home Field Advantage. Hope you're all having a great holiday week wherever and however you may be listening to us across our great country or our great land. I'm Will Highland. It is December 23rd, 2023. I told you I'd be recording one on Friday, December 22nd, and that's where I am today on Friday night recording. You are listening over the weekend, probably, or during the holidays. And if you're listening to us on the road, hope you are getting where you need to be safely and soundly. Appreciate you all listening to us during the holiday season. Hope you all are all having a merry and jolly time. In the spirit of Christmas, though, I would like to spend this episode talking about the things on my Christmas list in a sports fashion. I specifically am tailoring this to a Boston sports fan's Christmas wish list. And these are going to be things that I've talked about before in the past several months, but they're not going to be like generic and specific things, such as like, I want Yamamoto to sign with the Red Sox, or I want the Pats to draft a quarterback XYZ in the first round. Um, it's going to be a little bit broader than that, I guess. And actually, the Yamamoto thing is a little bit of a moot point now, considering he's joining the Dodgers, but perhaps that's a story for another show. In this instance, I want to focus on 7 things that I wrote down that I think will be specific to me, but also uh, are things that maybe a lot of other Boston sports fans might be thinking about too this time of year. And then I do have two in there that are actually like pretty specific to me. Like I have one in there about soccer and another one in there about Maine in general as it relates to sports. Um, but we'll start with probably the more pressing one, which is I want the Red Sox. This is the number one thing on my Christmas list, by the way. Boston sports fans Christmas list. I want the Red Sox to have a compelling team in spring training and early in the season. All right, pretty broad ask, not too specific, and pretty low bar. Right? Like I think mistakenly some people, as I've said before, in Red Sox media fans think that this team should be contending for a World Series title in year one under Breslow. I disagree. What I want to see is a team that is compelling, a team that is trying to win, a team that is invested financially and emotionally in itself, that doesn't quit on itself in August that we've seen recently, and a team that's not lucky, a team that has some conviction. And so where that all begins is in spring training, obviously even before that in the offseason. So in order for this to even happen, they got to get going and do a little bit more than signing Tyler O'Neill and Dick Fitz, you know. Um, so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for in February, in March, is this a team that I can buy into? Are there multiple starting pitchers that are new to this team? Are there bullpen arms like there were last year that you can look at and identify and say, I think that guy's going to be dangerous at the back end of the game? Are there young players like Sidney Rafaela or Tristan Casas or even somebody like Nick York that you can point to and say he or they are the future? Um, That's what I want. I want a compelling Red Sox team. I want a team that's competing. That doesn't, I believe they start the season with a long West Coast road trip. If I'm not mistaken, the last time that happened was 2019 at the beginning of the year. And to be honest, the Red Sox haven't been the same since. They've been underachieving and underwhelming ever since that opening week following their 2018 World Series. So it begins with them getting off to a good start. And the last thing I'll say about the Red Sox in particular is not only do I need them to be compelling in spring training in the beginning of the year, I need them to be something that I should invest my time into every night, right? Like I'm telling you, as I get older, it's hard. It's hard. I used to watch every Red Sox game, every Bruins game, every Patriots game, no matter what. As I get older, it's hard. And so they need to be a team that's compelling down the stretch that I want to believe in. Not a team that, I don't want to get too invested in with my time and effort and emotions just to be let down again. Because that's happened before. That happened in 2021. Ultimately, they put on a good show, but a lot of people forget that they were absolute dog water in between July and September, which is part of the reason why they missed out on home field advantage, so to speak, and all these other things. All right, the second thing on my Christmas list is I want a Jeremy Swayman extension with the Boston Bruins. All right. I don't want any more of this RFA nonsense. I don't want them to have to go to court or arbitration or any of these other things that happens. I actually don't really remember how the NHL works with this stuff. It's not like baseball, but either way, like they need to get the Swayman thing taken care of. Like in my opinion, he's been better than Allmark this year. It's pretty close. Last year wasn't close at all. As good as Swayman was, Allmark was next level. Um, but I think you're heading into this is year 3 of Allmark, and then next year will be the last year of Allmark's deal. Uh, he'll probably be a trade chip next year. He could be a trade chip over the summer. A lot of that depends on what you do with Jeremy Swayman, and I think they should just go out and just get the Swayman extension done, much like with Pasternak. I don't want to be waiting around because, as I've said for years now, he is the future. You have him on your team, and you have a situation where you can pretty much go from Rask to Allmark as a bridge to then Swayman for the next decade or so, and you have franchise goalies lined up, ready as heir apparents. And no disrespect to Allmark, I've liked him. He's a great teammate. He's been a good guy in the locker room. He won a Vezina for us last year, but I just think you have to get the Jeremy Swayman extension done. And what that looks like in terms of money, I don't know. I would say the goalie market, he's not as decorated as Hellebuck. So you're going to be looking at let's see what Connor Hellebuck got. Um, you're going to be looking at something similar to what Connor Hellebuck got, but probably a little bit lower, right? I don't think he's on the same level as Carey Price in terms of finances or anything like that. Um, but I think he signed a 7-year, $59.5 million dollar contract with the Jets. Um, I could see something similar. I could see an 8-year, you know, 63 million dollars over 8 years. Something like that for Jeremy Swayman comes out to be just under like 8 mil a year. Uh, I could see that happening for a guy of his caliber at this point, um, considering what he's been so far in his career. All right, third thing on my Christmas list is I want Mac Jones to get another job in the NFL. I mean, I've been a resident Mac guy. I've left the island in terms of him as the Patriots quarterback. I still think he can be pretty good in this league if you surround him with like competent coaching and talent. I look at a guy like Matt Stafford, who just recently you look at all the receivers that have had success with him as a ball distributor. I also think Matt Stafford's just good at his job. I think Mac Jones could get to that point. Maybe not as good as Matt Stafford. I mean, Matt Stafford won a Super Bowl. He's going to go to Canton. But could Mac Jones be somebody like Alex Smith, right? We talked about Alex Smith earlier. Absolutely. He could be somebody like Alex Smith who gives you a chance to win every game. Alex Smith always had pretty good talent around him. He had Anquan Bolden and Randy Moss in San Francisco. He also had that tight end there whose name is escaping me in San Francisco. And then when he went to Kansas City, he had sort of a lackluster wide receiving core at first. But they had Jamal Charles there, and I think Dwayne Bowe had a couple big years there with them. Not to mention the beginning of Travis Kelce's career in Kansas City. So, I think if you look at and of course playing with Andy Reid, um, Chip Kelly, some of the other people that he played for in his career. Sorry, not Chip Kelly, Jim Harbaugh. Uh, some of those other folks that he played for. I think Alex Smith was able to to gel right? Same thing with Matt Stafford, same thing with Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer never won a Super Bowl, but Carson Palmer's teams were always like hanging around and he had a pretty good NFL career. So that's what I look at with Mac Jones. Like, as I've always said, he's never going to be a fantasy quarterback, but can he be a reality quarterback in this league? I think so. And so one thing on my Christmas list is I'm off the Mac Island in New England. I don't think it's going to work here for a multitude of reasons that I've talked about for weeks now, months now. But is it possible that Mac Jones goes somewhere else and has success? Yes. Is that a place like the Commanders or, the Raiders or, uh, you know, uh, a team like Minnesota if, the Kirk Cousins thing doesn't work out or really anywhere that you can point to, Tampa Bay, that would be ironic. All those things, I could see that happening, and I could see Mac, sort of thriving in a different place in his own respect. Uh, I still think, even to this point, if you look at the rest of the quarterbacks in that draft, he's had a better NFL career than Trey Lance so far. Uh, I think he's had a better career than Zach Wilson so far. Justin Fields, the jury's still out on Justin Fields, I think. I mean, I don't think Justin Fields is ever going to be what was supposed to be, but he could still be decent. And then Trevor Lawrence, I mean, you look at Trevor Lawrence, I think up until this year, he and Mac were about tied, but I'd say Trevor Lawrence is still the best out of that draft. I don't think Mac is gone. He might be finished in New England, and maybe that's what's best for him. But I would just hope this Christmas that next year the Patriots can move on, get somebody better, but that Mac has an ability to get another chance somewhere else, even if it's as a long-term backup. All right, speaking of the Patriots, I want the Patriots to have their own conviction. I talked about the Red Sox being compelling. I want the Patriots to have some conviction this offseason, right? And what that means to me is not fire Bill because the fan base wants to fire Bill or because they're reactionary. It doesn't mean draft a quarterback with the number one pick just because you have the number one pick. What I want the Patriots to do is have some conviction in their decision making because it seems like in the last few years they've had a propensity to sort of treat every season as its own season rather than as a piece of a movement toward competitive football long term, right? Like you could play it season by season when you had Tom Brady here in his prime for 18, 19 years. You can't do season by season planning of your organization with you know a rookie quarterback that you're developing or offensive coaches that you're treating like a revolving door or a defense that's you know in transition, right? They transitioned sort of away from the Van Noy and Hightower led linebacking core in front seven to more of a front seven led by, Jawan Bentley and Christian Barmore or in Matt Judon, right? Like they had some conviction on the defensive side of the ball in terms of building a long-term defense. I think Kyle Duggar and Christian Gonzalez were great picks. Uh, I think they're going to be okay in the future. I think that they had Marte Mapu and some of these other guys that they've drafted over the years, Christian Barmore, Keon White. These are all guys that are going to fit well on this defense. What I want is conviction in terms of the big decisions, right? Like the big decision about quarterback in the 2019-20 offseason was obviously Brady was halfway out the door. He was leaving. But instead of drafting somebody like Jalen Hurts or Jordan Love, who I'm not a huge fan of, in the first round that year, they pretended that they were going to stick with Stidham and then signed Cam Newton halfway into the summer, and it just never really worked out. And then they sort of picked Mac Jones because he was sitting there. I don't, and as at the time I thought it was because they really believed in him, but it seems like it was just sort of a he's there, so I'm going to grab him kind of thing. And so this year, like I would just want the Pats to pick some sort of path that has some belief and some like intentionality behind it rather than just going with whatever's happening because that's not how his Kraft has run this team. And with the coaching thing in particular, like if you're going to fire Bill Belichick, who, despite what I've said about him not being a great coach without Tom Brady, he still had Tom Brady, so you do have to still refer to him as a great coach, I guess, if you're going to talk about his job and moving on from him. There's still big shoes to fill, whether or not you want to put the onus on it was Bill or it was Brady. It's still huge shoes to fill. So if you're going to do that, like, what is your replacement plan? Because like I just went through, there was no Brady replacement plan. And so what I want this year is the Patriots to have some sort of conviction in their decisions, a true pathway heading forward, not some sort of flying by the seat of their pants, half-assed approach that's going to lead them to be like all those teams we made fun of for decades. All right, last professional sports thing before I move on uh, to Tottenham and you made two more Will-centric things on my Christmas list. I want Celtics fans and the Celtics in general to stop using the term championship or bust. I've heard that. Look, I'm not a big basketball guy. I like the Celtics, so I'll pull for them, as I've talked about many times. But one thing that I've noticed about Celtics fans is, especially in like the last 3 years, we've had a big like championship or bust movement. All right. And I don't need to be a student of NBA history to tell you that every time that's happened, whether it was in the bubble, whether it was in the year that they was it the year they lost to the Bucks, 2021? I can't remember honestly. Um, whether it was anyway the bubble year, the 2021 year, whether it was the year they lost to the Warriors or whether it was last year when they lost to the Heat, anything that we've seen, well, all I've heard is championship or bust. Championship or bust. Well, at some point, if you're going to keep saying championship or bust and you're getting bust, then something's got to change and you got to stop using that term. You got to say you got to start saying something like championship or rebuild. And not rebuild in terms of tear it all down, but rebuild in terms of like figure out which one of the J's you want and identify that guy and keep that guy. I know they swapped out Marcus Smart for Porzingis. Porzingis was dealing with a little bit of an injury. Derek White's been good. Al Horford's coming back. But this band has had a lot of cracks at the can. And what I look at as somebody who favors more of the other tenant in TD Garden, it's that when you start running it back with essentially the same group every year and you don't get it done, that becomes your identity. Your identity isn't, we have a top 5 player in the league or top 10 player in the league, at least in Jason Tatum. I would say top 5. Then you have a top 20 player in Jaylen Brown, and you probably have still at this point in his career a top 40 player as well in Porzingis. Not to mention if we're talking about, complementary pieces, I would put Horford and Derek White in the top 100 in the league. So say you have 5 top 100 players in the league, plus a solid young coach, a competent general manager. Your identity will no longer be that. It will be you're the team that has to do championship or bust every year, and you're getting more bust than you are championship. So that's my one thing is Celtics fans, like I love you guys, I'm friends with a lot of you. But it's if you keep saying it's championship or bust, and then when the bust happens, you say, well, next year's championship or bust. Essentially, at one point, the bust becomes what you are. That's what the Bruins were. Like, I love Patrice Bergeron. I love Brad Marchand. I love Taylor Hall for the short time he was here. Charlie McAvoy, all these guys that we've had through the years. David Krejci, Tuca. At some point, if you don't win, that's what you are. And look, the Bruins won way back in 2011, but they were still saying championship or bust in 2023, right? And look what happened against Florida. So that's my warning to Celtics fans. You get yourself into this championship or bust mentality. Look, they're being world beaters right now, right? 21-6 or something like that. They're on fire. They're a great team and they're dangerous. So you should feel that way. You should feel championship or bust. But if you don't win the championship and you keep saying championship or bust, something's got to change, and it's got to be a little bit more than Marcus Smart and Kristaps Porzingis. Whether that's letting a guy like Jaylen Brown be dealt. I don't know. They signed him the biggest contract ever. Things are going to have to happen. Things are going to have to happen fast if they don't win a championship. This could all be a moot point otherwise, but we shall see. All right, a couple other things and small things. I want UMaine hockey to make the NCAA tournament. I think at last check they were eighth or ninth nationally ranked. They're going to make some noise in the Hockey East tournament. I don't think they win the Hockey East tournament. That would give them, of course, uh, an automatic bid into the NCAA tournament. But I don't think that they're going to do that. I think BU is really good. I think there's a couple other teams that are just super talented. So uh, so my hypothesis would be, is it you're going to deal with Province, you're going to deal with UNH, you're going to deal with BU, BC. That's all going to be very tough. Quinnipiac, and I think is in the conference. You're going to deal with all these guys. My thing is, if they can stay where they are, if you're a top 10, maybe even a top 15 team heading into your conference tournament, and you at least win a couple games in your conference tournament, maybe not go to the semifinals or the finals, they might get an at-large bid, and I think that would be huge for Ben Barr's program. Um, they have so many good players, top to bottom, especially their defense. Their defense is really strong, and they have a lot of freshmen on that defense. And Victor Osman's been amazing in goal. He's definitely matured. But if I'm a Maine hockey fan, which I am, want these guys to qualify for the NCAA tournament. Not asking them to make the Frozen Four. I just think if you are a threat to make the tournament every year, as Javier Garritti says on the Big Jab, then you are a legitimate bona fide program that in this age of transfer portal and recruiting, you will do well. Speaking of doing well, I think Tottenham Hotspur has navigated the storm of losing James Madison, Mickey Van de Ven, Christian Romero, all these other players that they've lost to injury and whatnot over the past few weeks and months. They've hung around. They're near the top of the table. They're usually fifth or sixth, depending on games played and point differential and stuff like that. I want them to qualify for the UEFA Champions League. I think they are strong enough still if they can get back. They've played a lot of hard matches already. They've played Liverpool and won. They've played Man United and won. They've played City and drawn, right? Like they've played Arsenal and drawn. So some of their hardest fixtures, like Arsenal away and Man City away, those are in the past. They're gonna have some hard ones. They're gonna go to Anfield late in the year. They're gonna have the North London Derby in January, I believe. There's gonna be some hard games. I'm not saying it's gonna be easy, but if they can get these guys back the way Anja's these guys playing, I want them to qualify for the Champions League because while Harry Kane is scoring a shit ton of goals in a lesser league, I think that would be some pretty good drama if those two, Bayern and Tottenham, met in a UCL group stage in 2024. That would be really entertaining. So I'm just putting that out into the ether right now. All right. So that wraps up my Christmas list. Just going through here real quick. We have the Red Sox have a compelling season, right? We have the Bruins to extend Jeremy Swayman. We have the Patriots to have conviction in their decisions this offseason. We want Mac Jones to get a job somewhere. We want I say we, it's me. We we want Tottenham to qualify for the Champions League, and we want Maine to make the NCAA tournament. Those are my holiday wish list and Christmas things that I want to find in my stocking rather than a lump of coal. Brought to you by John Henry and the Fenway Sports Group. I want to actually wake up and feel energized. Maybe I'm not asking for all six of these things to be in under the tree, but if we could get 3 or 4, I would be ecstatic. Right? Like I'm not gonna rank them. I think, you know, they're all fun things to me, especially the Tottenham and Maine thing. But like, if you're a Boston sports fan, those things, I think there's things we can agree on. Oh, and I did forget. We want the Celtics, of course, to stop using the phrase championship or bust, because then you're just going to end up with, disappointment on your kids' faces when they open their presents on Christmas and it's in 2024, and it's a jersey of a Celtics player that maybe isn't on the team anymore because something bad happened. I don't want any of that to go on. I want the Celtics to get their championship, all right, so that everybody can stop saying that. All right. Lastly, just gonna throw this out there before we close the show. I'm gonna have a re-air of last year's greatest athlete of all time draft that Cam, Kyle, and I did around this time last year. We're going to put that up next week in case you missed it last year. Even if you listened last year, it's still fun. We enjoyed it. We're going to throw that up as a re-air. All right. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is I will be back next week. We'll do a year in review at the end of next week. But hopefully you listen to that. Though with what I'm about to say, you might cancel me. I want to quickly tell you, my wife and I were going to go watch some Christmas movies pretty soon. I'm going to tell you the 5 most overrated Christmas movies. And so we're talking about the greatest athlete of all time draft. All right. If you were doing a Christmas movie draft, a lot of these picks would go in the top 15. In my opinion, they don't belong there. Or even if they do, they're a little bit inflated in their value. All right. This is going to cause some problems, but I'm just going to go through it. I'm going to start with the least overrated and go to the most overrated. All right. First one I'll go to is Home Alone 2. All right. Home Alone 1 is nails. Love Home Alone 1. Home Alone 2 is practically the same movie in a different place. I'm just going to throw that out there. And it's less compelling because you've seen Home Alone 1 and you've seen everything that happens. And so you kind of know what's going to happen in Home Alone 2. Like the Trump cameo, I guess, was interesting at the time. It's even more interesting in hindsight. The setting was different. You had the nice lady with the doves or something like that from the park. There are a few good moments in there. But the one thing I'll point out is the McAllisters are going on another vacation and they forget Kevin again. Or Kevin gets lost again and stays home. Gets on the wrong plane, I guess, in this case. If I had gone on a trip to Paris and left my kid at home, and then I'm going to Florida for another Christmas vacation, and my kid is still at home or on a different place, like I would have watched my kid and like held my kid. All right. This good thing this was made before cancel culture because, DHS would have had something to say about, or DHHS as we call it in Maine, would have had something to say about that situation. So Home Alone 2, very overrated. Home Alone 1's nails. Home Alone 2, not so much, but I think we can all agree that usually the sequels aren't. All right. This next one has Tim Allen in it, but it's not the Tim Allen movie that you think I'm going to say because Tim Allen is awesome in the Santa Claus trilogy. Now, those, much like Home Alone, they get worse as they progress. Santa Claus is pretty good. I think it's the best of the 3. It's one of the best all time, in my opinion. Santa Claus 2 is decent. You get the girl from Lost in there. Santa Claus 3 is trash. Is it Martin Short in that one? Like I like Martin Short, but not really my thing. So that's not the Tim Allen movie I'm going with. I'm going with Christmas with the Cranks. All right. I love cruises. I like Tim Allen. Jamie Lee Curtis is okay. That movie does nothing for me, and people love it still, and I don't really get it. All right. Not much else to say about that. Other than Christmas cruises tend to not work out. There was in real life just an instance where people got on in New York thinking they were going to the Bahamas for a Christmas cruise. Because of weather, it got derailed and they ended up going to Portland, Maine, Boston, and St. John, New Brunswick. All three great cities, very close to my heart, but not the Bahamas in December. So just throwing it out there, much like the McAllisters or the Cranks, anytime you mess around with the Christmas vacation, it doesn't tend to work. All right. Speaking of Christmas vacation, this is probably going to be the most problematic one. I like Christmas Vacation. It's a good movie, all right? Don't get me wrong. People talk about it though like it is the best movie that's ever been made at Christmas time, and I just disagree. Like Chevy Chase is compelling. I like him. He's funny. The movie has, good, a good ending, with the boss giving out, the bonuses and whatnot, and not pressing charges, and the family being together and all these things, and sort of and sort of Clark realizing that there's more to Christmas than the pomp and circumstance. Like it's a fine film. It's fine, but you know, I've got two problems with it. Number one, it's funny the first couple times you see it, and the humor is good. I like it, but it's not the funniest thing I've ever seen. I think some of the humor is overrated because it's situational humor, and a lot of it is expected humor. What I mean is, one of the reasons why it's a good movie still, maybe not a great or an amazing movie, one of the reasons why it's a good movie is because you buy into the jokes because the jokes itself are the nostalgia, right? But that's kind of where it ends because you're not really laughing at the joke. You're laughing at the memory of when you first heard the joke, right? That maybe that's just me. I could be way off base. I might get some hate mail for this. I think Christmas Vacation's a good, solid, funny movie, but it's not the amazing movie that everybody talks about it like it is. It's just slightly overrated to me. All right. Second is Elf. I have a little bit of bias because Elf, I tried to see it with my family. There were four of us in, I think, 2003 when it came out. We're going to go see it in theaters. There were three seats left. So we're a family of four. So from that moment on, I was kind of soured toward Elf. Watched it a few times growing up, and then again, a few times, as an adult. And it's just not really the movie that it's cracked up to be. Like, first of all, I'm just not a big Will Ferrell guy, so there's a little bit of bias there. Second of all, I hate to cancel and make and ruin everyone's Christmas fun, but much like with Christmas Vacation, you're laughing at the nostalgia of the jokes and not really the jokes itself because the writing isn't that funny. It's funny like maybe the first couple times, and then you're just like, yep, and here comes the this, here comes the that. Um, and it's just sort of so any of these like make believe reality movies, like just they really don't do well for me. Like Night at the Museum, I loved, but Elf is pretty much like a Christmas Night at the Museum, where it's like a guy from not reality trying to fit into reality and what have you, sort of like um, what was that movie with Patrick Dempsey and Amy Adams where it was like animated half the movie and not I forget. Um, Pretty much like that. That's sort of what Elf is to me. It just doesn't do a lot for me. But again, I have some serious bias, and I do think it's incredibly overrated. Um, and here's the number one most overrated Christmas movie of all time: A Christmas Story. It's not funny. Um, None of the humor is good, and it's just so bizarre and outside the realm of like it's not even heartwarming to me. Like, by the time you get to the heartwarming parts of Christmas movies, you're like way past. You're like 2 hours in by the time you're into the heartwarming part of this particular Christmas movie. Some people might say that about my favorite Christmas movie, which is It's a Wonderful Life. It takes 2.5 hours to be happy. I get that. But that was a different movie in a different time. Christmas Story is a different movie in a different time too. Um, but it doesn't do anything for me. Like the stupid bunny suit and the rifle and the lamp and all and the tongue on the pole and all these things that like make the movie timeless in terms of the references just doesn't do anything for me, and it's not funny, and I don't really like the morals of it. Like the moral of the story isn't really that great. Um, so it's just incredibly overrated to me, and the fact that it's on as much as it is frustrating. All right. So I hope you're still listening and that you have still subscribed to this podcast after all that. Look, if you love any of those movies, that's great. That's the great thing about sports, culture, literature, film, anything is that it's subjective and you can like what you want. I'm just telling you, as the guy with the podcast, that's my take on him. You don't have to agree with me, of course. You're entitled to your own opinion. Um, but I would like to hear a comment. You can certainly DM us or drop a comment or a rating comment with that, depending on what you think. We'd appreciate it if you like, shared, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as here on our YouTube channel. We appreciate you checking in with us tonight. Um, as always, I'll try and keep you all updated with any news and notes. We'll see what happens on the sports realm in the future. And you can also hit us up there on socials as well at Homefield Pod and uh, at Sportland USA on Twitter, and then at Homefield Pod on Instagram. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Hope you have a great rest of your Christmas season. Encourage you to listen to our re-air next week and our year in review show at the end of next week. But until then, my name is Will Highland. Merry Christmas. You've been listening to another episode of Home Field Advantage.